Thanks, Tom, and I apologise in advance that us Kiwis aren't known for being particularly politically correct. So I'll just say it as I see it. And thanks for the opportunity to speak. Once you've heard what I have to say, it might be the only time I get, so I'll make the most of it. I'm convinced that today's inconvenient truth is that we continue to invest enormous resource the world over in debating climate and change regulatory frameworks, but we're failing in most instances to take even the most basic steps to actually reduce emissions. These policy discussions and hand-wringing over agreeing emission reduction targets are interminable, and they're distracting us from the far more important focus of taking action, and we believe that that's a travesty. To my mind, the UN climate change discussions amplify all that is wrong with global politics. Whether under the Framework Convention on Climate Change, ICAO, or elsewhere, it seems to be the same procrastination, multiple conferences of many thousands, turgid presentations, and inequitable, albeit politically acceptable, backroom deals determining the shape of unwieldy global agreements at a glacial pace. From our small country alone, hundreds of long-haul sectors will have been flown this calendar year by government officials to take part in UN climate change-related talks. Frankly, I'd rather forgo the revenue we get from this bureaucratic circus. I'm very happy to see a price on carbon. It should be applied equitably across geographies, uniformly across all industry sectors, and it should incentivise improvement and investment in new green technologies rather than simply penalise all activity. I look forward to the day when we all stop protecting our respective butts in the endless policy debates and start focusing globally on concerted action. Just imagine what we could achieve if 1/10 of the global bank bailout funds from the past 12 months were directed towards the environment instead. I'm sure what's happened in my own country in terms of domestic climate change politics will have mirrored that which has occurred in other countries around the world. When I joined Air New Zealand in 2003, the New Zealand government was pondering a carbon tax. Today, 6 years later, our government is arguing for its third year over details of an emissions trading scheme. No one has yet faced 1 cent of cost on their carbon emissions. Businesses in New Zealand as elsewhere have been heavily incentivised to engage in the regulatory process and invest countless hours and millions of dollars on consultants' fees to protect their own self-interests and minimise their particular carbon liabilities. As sector after sector has argued its special position domestically in New Zealand, responsibility for meeting the country's Kyoto targets is squeezed onto the shoulders of a smaller and smaller proportion of our population and business community. There have clearly been winning and losing sectors from climate change lobbying in New Zealand. And I get most frustrated that the environment continues to lose out in the face of all this unproductive hot air that is expended arguing regulatory technicalities. It's a travesty given this focus and resource could be channelled into capital investment, operational improvements and research and development into clean technologies. Within Air New Zealand, it's a no-brainer for us to prioritise emissions reductions. First, there is a direct link between burning fuel and greenhouse gas emissions. Fuel is our largest cost. For an airline that made a normalised profit of 143 million New Zealand dollars in our last financial year, our fuel bill was $1.7 billion. We have an enormous financial incentive to reduce our fuel consumption and therefore our carbon emissions. Secondly, New Zealand is one of the most pristine, youngest and least spoilt environments in the world. Food production and tourism are the foundation of our economy, and both are dependent on sound environmental management and maintaining our country's environmental credibility, so we can continue justifiably to market ourselves as we do today, 100% pure New Zealand. Thirdly, our airline is a large employer in our small country and is an integral part of our country's economy. Consideration for future generation comes naturally in this context. These are the reasons why at Air New Zealand we spend only a small fraction of our time on the interminable climate change policy debates, and instead we're investing our efforts into actions that are making material differences in terms of the environment. The need for us to act was brought home to me in an interview I gave in the UK a little while back. It was a couple of years. The journalist told me that she had always wanted to visit New Zealand to experience its natural beauty firsthand. But she drew an analogy of saying she couldn't bring herself to do it because she felt that travelling all that way on a 747 to New Zealand, she said it would be like going to a Greenpeace rally in a Hummer. I didn't like the analogy, and I spent most of the rest of the interview trying to convince her not to print that particular phrase. But it was a catalyst for us and a rallying cry to say we have to do something as an airline to ensure that our value proposition can stand proudly side by side with the value proposition of the country that tourists want to come and visit. So I've challenged my team to position Air New Zealand as the most environmentally responsible airline on the planet. We've identified the initiatives that can make the biggest difference in pursuing that goal, and I'll touch on a few of these in a moment. But our approach is constantly evolving as we identify new opportunities and new technologies. First and foremost is our fleet investment. Just as you heard from CS earlier in the day, having a young fleet is one of the most significant impacts we can have on our emissions intensity. And there is no bigger step that we can take than making sure we have the most fuel efficient aircraft available. Next year we will take delivery of our first order of 777-300ERs. They'll be 15% more fuel efficient than our ageing 747 fleet that they replace. As a launch customer of Boeing 787-9s, sometime soon, we're looking forward to the achievement of up to 20% fuel efficiency over our 767s. And the delays, I must say, in that program are causing us immense frustration because we do want to get access to those benefits, both economically and for our environmental plan. Nonetheless, on completion of these deliveries, our long-haul fleet mix will be 777 and 787 twin-engine jets with vast efficiencies over what we currently have. The 787-9s could easily have been designed specifically for Air New Zealand. Based in a small country a long way from many of our key inbound tourism markets, long skinny routes, an aircraft of this design is perfect for us. When I talk fit for mission, an aircraft like the 787-9 is exactly what we visualise. It's ideal for our current network, our growth strategy, and the markets we service point to point.